so many people, like they have their lives on hold until they get to like, I want to be this weight, or I want to be this in my career, or I want to be this. And it's like, there is nothing wrong with you the way that you are. Yeah. You can do all of this stuff.
I'm Eric Newton, and this is Together, the podcast where we explore the truth about human relationships. As a divorce lawyer, I saw thousands of couples break up firsthand. These days, I'm not so interested in breaking couples up, nor in keeping them together. I'm interested in what our relationships can teach us about ourselves and the world that we live in. So on this show, we have honest conversations with real people about real relationships. Today's episode, number 131, I'm excited to say, marks the last episode of Season 2, which means that we are now on summer break. Big things are afoot this summer. Aubrey doesn't love it when I talk about our personal life on the show, but hopefully I'll have two very significant announcements for you when we get back in September, and I'm sure you can fill in with your imagination what these two announcements might be. And another tidbit is that I have finally relented to requests from listeners, and I've begun to work with a very small number of couples to help them prepare for the longer-term commitments that they're taking on of various relationship types. Now, I have a curriculum that I've developed over the years, and it started with an old friend of mine who's a therapist in San Diego, and I gotta say it's pretty good. Now, I honestly don't have many spaces available for this because it's not my full-time focus, but if you're interested in doing such a thing, please reach out. I'd love to talk to you anyway, and we can have a chat and see what's possible. But enough of that, let's talk about our episode. Now, for me, the question of truth is at the core of how I try to approach things in life. And yes, truth is a broad concept full of endless philosophical loops and spiritual cul-de-sacs. But when we get right down to it, most of us know what's true in a given moment. And we know what really needs to be said in that same moment, if only we can muster the courage. Now, this is easy at times and of course hard at others, but some of us are blessed with a deep and natural comfort with that truth. Our guest today, Rachel Dwight, is one of those rare souls. Now, I'll let Rachel define themselves because it's more honest and I think a lot more fun that way. But I will tell you that I originally brought Rachel on to talk about this idea that we're all entitled to sexual pleasure no matter our body type. That's a topic that Rachel advocates frequently, and it's a truth that we all need to hear because every one of us limits ourselves in ways that we're just not even conscious about most of the time. Now, we do discuss that issue, but we also cover so much more. And so with that, let's go to our interview with Rachel Dwight. Let's start with your identity.
Okay, so I am a super fat, queer, trans, disabled white person. And that my identity has actually been a really important part in the work that I do and advocating from those things and needing support in the world that doesn't exist and wanting to create that for my community.
Well, which is what's exciting about what you do. But you're when you say your identity, you're smiling. I chuckled when you said it because you're smiling when you say it.
Yeah, I actually have had this conversation I've had people to my face tell me that I'm not fat, and I'm like, what? because I am. And what you actually mean is that I'm not gross and lazy and all of these other negative things that in our culture we've come to associate with being fat. Right. And I think it's a really important thing to kind of pick that apart and say, actually, what you're doing is making my body a pejorative. You're using it, like, for example, a couple of days ago, I was walking my dog and a man yelled out of the window of his car, "Hey, you're really fat." And it's like, yeah, What? and because if I own that and take it as my own, that can't hurt me.
Yeah.
But if you think being fat is bad, then that's going to hurt you.
Yeah. And
I have done a lot of work to love my body the way that it is. Like that's not, and it's a process. There are days.
Yeah.
Everybody has their days. And that's one thing. That's another thing. The process of things I think is really important. In people can't be reduced to simple. That's my other big thing is we want to put people into boxes.
Yeah.
And like these little like the book The Women Are From Venus,
Men Are From Mars.
Yeah, Men Are From Mars. Like that leaves no room for nuance. And it's so like, true. but it's really interesting because we as humans, and this is what I find really interesting about things like stereotypes, is that we as humans, that skill that we have to put things in boxes is really helpful when it comes to navigating the world. Like being able to compress all of this information and know, okay, so I walk into the lobby of a building. I know that I go look at the thing on the wall that tells me where I need to go, and I know when I go up the elevator, or the stairs, or whatever, and you know how to do that. And if you had to figure that out every time you walked into a building.
Totally.
So what we do is then we take those skills and then we apply it to people.
Yeah.
And that doesn't work.
Doesn't. Well, I mean, this is the fine line that you walk because the term super fat is a label.
Yeah.
And you're putting yourself in a box by reclaiming it.
Yeah. That is a choice. And the super is also part of that. Most people are like, what does that mean? Super fat is, I can't buy clothing in stores. I can't pretend to fit into one airplane seat. I can't generally fit into chairs with arms. Part of this whole process for this, doing this right here, talking, it was getting the studio accessible for me.
Yeah.
And that's a thing that people don't realize how inaccessible the world can be for various people. And being super fat is one of the people that kind of gets completely left out because we're still debating whether or not it's okay to, be mean to fat people.
I mean, I guess I hope nobody's actually debating that question,
but I mean, I think to a point people are. I mean, and that's the scary thing is that there are people that honestly believe that berating fat people for being fat will actually, one, make them somehow shame them into losing weight.
Yeah.
And like that whole conversation is so, the idea that like weighing less is like good for you. Like there isn't evidence that making a fat person thin actually does anything to their health.
On one hand, you're reclaiming the term so that it can't hurt you. I completely get that.
Yeah.
And you're also acknowledging what's just objectively in some sense true.
Yeah.
But and then there's this thing that people out there do, which is try to shame you by being awful into losing weight. But I wonder, which is just stupid.
Well,
but I wonder, like, what if you wanted to lose weight? I don't know if you want to lose weight or not. You don't want to.
No, I want to live in a world that like respects my body and other people's bodies. And so one of the things that I talk about with accessibility, because I just to be clear, I have the first body inclusive sex care store that's about supporting people of all sizes, physical abilities, ages, and anatomies to have great sex. That's called Respect Our Sex, and that's mostly what we're talking about. But another piece of what I do is called Approaching Access, which is about supporting businesses, like making accessibility more accessible to businesses and people. And when I talk about that, it's a more broad thing, but our world was created around us by people.
Yeah.
Every person has access needs. Every person. And our world has been built to accommodate some and not others.
Yeah.
And so it's not my fault that the world hasn't taken people of my size and ability and whatnot into account.
I love that you don't want to lose weight.
No.
It's like it's such a powerful stance. How do you relate to people that would describe themselves as super fat who do want to lose weight? What's your opinion about them?
So people can do whatever it is that they want for them. People, it's another Reagan thing is called the underpants rule, is that you can, I can talk about my stuff and you can do I do what I want with my underpants. You can do what you want with yours, and you don't need to be in each other's.
Yeah.
And, I think it is a hard thing to navigate emotionally. I think sometimes, if you have somebody that's close to you that's dealing with that, I think for me, I would, be supportive in a way that I can, but also look at my own boundaries. What I can do is say, hey, this is what both my academic life and my lived life has shown me. And if you want to hear about it and talk about it and, advice or whatever, then fine.
Yeah.
If not, I can't necessarily engage and support you in this thing that you're doing.
Yeah.
Because that's harmful to me.
Yeah.
And that's without judgment. You can do what you want, and I don't have to be a part of it. And I think there's this cultural thing of everybody talks about it, and it's no.
Well, speaking of the underpants thing, in a way, how do you want people to, define you?
Define me. So,
people don't say, oh, this is Eric, he's a skinny guy.
Yeah.
Nobody does that. They just say, this is Eric.
But that's the thing is, I think it's a thing that people do, not for people that have normative bodies, which is what I would call yours. You're the person, you blend in, your quote unquote normal, right?
Yeah.
People think it about me whether or not I say it. Mm. And so by naming it, I have maybe a little bit more control over it. Mm. And one of the things, I say that a lot, another thing is that I get negative looks all the time from people, dirty looks for existing. But a lot of people don't yell out their cars or whatever. Some people do sometimes, but the energy and nonverbal language is a thing. And so I live in a world that constantly tells me my body isn't okay, even regardless of whether or not anything is said to me.
You're also trans and queer and disabled. Is there anything to say about each of those? So
I identify as non-binary trans, which means that I'm neither male nor female. Gender fluid and flux are two words that I use to describe myself sometimes. Fluid is kind of moving, not static, things change. And then flux is a term that it's kind of, to me, it's like volume. Sometimes gender matters some days more than others. It's today the volume gets turned up for some reason and it's really important. And then some days it's not.
I love that idea.
Yeah. And some days that...
right, of course, because why does it have to be static, actually?
Yeah. Yeah. And so some days I sit outside my closet and because I can't find anything to wear that fits how I feel that day. And some days it doesn't matter at all.
For people who aren't super familiar with this conversation, can you break out the distinction between gender and sex?
So sex is biology, is what... the body parts that you have, and that, even though we talk about it like it is a binary, it is not. There are a lot of people that are born intersex, which means they have some of both or some alternate form altogether. And there's quite a lot of people. I want to say 1% to 2%, but I'm not sure. I would have to look it up. But regardless of how many people there are as a percentage of the population, there are people that's how their body is. And so just to acknowledge that there isn't, even though we talk about it there's only two, there's not. And that's a really important distinction to make. So that's biology, that's sex. And then gender is how you identify and express yourself in relation to certain the construct of gender, of what we've created as a culture through history as masculine and feminine. And it can actually be really complicated because the things that have been put in the masculine box and the feminine box are arbitrary.
So true.
So arbitrary. And so like, and so there's a lot of actually room in the middle to if you're so inclined to play with. And that's where I land, and I don't know where. I mean, I guess I'm kind of more like scooting around. I don't think I've landed in any particular location.
It's not static. Why
it's not
would you
static.
land?
I'm tootling around, and like I know, like I actually for a long time I didn't identify as trans. I didn't want to take away from the experience of like trans women who get harassed all the time. You know what I mean? Like I'm like, okay, so I'm not that.
Yeah.
So like, how do I? Well, actually, me embracing my identity and that I'm somewhere in the middle gives an opportunity for other people to see their truth and be present and be out. And so it's like, it's just creating more space in the trans community for more people, as opposed to being like, you have to be like this to be trans, because that's not true. Because like the definition of trans is being a gender that you were not assigned at birth. I am not that. I'm not a cis person, which is what cis means, is that you are what you were assigned at birth.
Yeah. You are the gender that you were assigned in terms of your sex.
In terms of your sex, yeah. So it's that's an important thing to say. So you get assigned a sex at birth, usually male or female, unless somebody notices that there might be some kind of something that's different there. And then with that biological, distinction, everything else in your life is determined by your genitals.
Yeah. and as you said, the traits are so arbitrary.
It's so arbitrary.
Men are authoritative and women are compliant. Like what?
No.
Where the hell did that come from?
And then like the fact that like 100 years ago the blue and the pink were flipped.
Right. Exactly.
It's like it's completely arbitrary. And
high heels. Right.
Yeah. That's the thing too. Yeah. Men used to wear heels as a part of status and things.
Your message, the reason I love your message is it speaks to so many people. It speaks to people with normative bodies who have insecurities, which by your definition are unfounded. And it speaks to people with non-normative bodies who have insecurities, which are by definition unfounded. And yet we all are swimming in this universe of self-created frustrations about ourselves. How do you begin to break that cycle if you're somebody who is just starting to realize that you don't allow yourself pleasure? What's the step? What are the process here?
So the first thing I think is to realize that there is nothing wrong with you as you are right now. You can play this over and over again if you'd like. There is nothing wrong with you. You are okay exactly the way that you are. Start there and try to internalize some part of that message, because it all comes back to grounding in that. Like, as a human, I'm deserving of these things. I'm deserving of love and intimacy and partnership, or whatever of those that you want, that would work for you in your life. And just so many people, like they have their lives on hold until they get to like, I want to be this weight, or I want to be this in my career, or I want to be this, and it's like, there is nothing wrong with you the way that you are. Yeah. You can do all of this stuff.
Meanwhile, your life is
happening. And that's, I think, the biggest thing. And it kind of goes back to, we touched earlier about the fact that I like own the word fat. Like, knowing that I'm fat and that's part of who I am, and like that gives me the power to be like, okay, me as a fat person gets to do all of those things.
Yeah, I really love this fundamental acknowledgement that you as a fat person, or you as any person, are entitled to the same experience of pleasure that anybody is.
Yes.
And it's almost like just knowing, just even saying it out loud is
super powerful.
Is super, super powerful. And but there must be steps that then happen after that too, right? To root that in your awareness.
Yeah. read books by people that have gone through shit. Seeing that you can overcome stuff, like that's a good place to start and can be inspiring. There's also looking at yourself in the mirror naked and just be in the reality of your own body.
Oh,
and
man.
I had like body dysmorphia in the way it was, people experience it in different ways, but the mental person I had in my head was not who I was physically, because I was told that the person I was physically wasn't okay.
Right.
And so when I would look in the mirror, there would be a jarring, like really look at myself. I'd be like, oh, that's not me. And now I don't do that. I mean, now I'm like, but for, you know, I remember doing like as a teenager and as like even at like 10 or 11, having that not congruent mental image to my reality. You know, starting with things like that and also being gentle with yourself.
You know, we've come a long way, yes, but I was just browsing television the other day, which I don't do very often, and I ran across basically an entire network that body shames fat people. I don't remember which one it was, but there was My 600 Pound Life was one of the names of one of the shows. And it was a show all about, it was a couple. It was like this super fat couple that was desperate to lose the weight and was trying to do whatever they could to lose it and shaming themselves for it and failing and failing and failing. And it was kind of like this, watching the train wreck of constant failure. Yeah. And I don't know. I don't want to judge their desire to lose weight. Like if they want to lose weight, fine. Yeah,
but I think what I think is an important distinction there is the desire to lose weight comes from wanting to not be hurt.
Yeah.
And so it's not, if people weren't trying to hurt them, would they still be wanting to lose weight? And I think that's the question to ask, because where is that coming from? Why do people feel like they need to change their body? Why do people feel like they need weight loss surgery? Why? Because people are telling them that they are bad, that they are wrong. If you actually let people live the way that they are and be happy with themselves and love themselves, like it's a completely different conversation. And another thing, and this is also part of like oppression politics and how this works of, you know, oppressing people so that they have less power. What could those people be doing if they weren't spending all of their time on that?
Yeah.
You know,
Totally.
What could you be doing?
You know, the other interesting thing I remember. Having good sex. Well, that's going to be my point. Is they one point in the show they say we haven't had sex in whatever it was X number of years. Yeah. And they didn't really go into why they didn't have sex. Yeah. They kind of alluded to the idea that it was physically too difficult. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. I don't know what.
It's the assumption, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it could be that. I mean, well, physical, so one of the ways that I look at something like that is that it's not that, like, it's an access need and a challenge. It's not something that, like, is preventative. Like, there are various positions and tools, like there are ramps and wedges and things that can help people be in different positions to have, like, for like a straight couple for like penetrative sex. Mm-hmm. Like there's lots of different types of sex. Let's not be like heteronormative and
yeah, there's tons of different
ways to have sex. So so like often, and I think that's actually another thing with like normative people with normative body, you have what normal sex is, and if you can't do that, then you don't have sex. And it's like, but there are lots of different kinds of sex, and actually that's one of the things that I think is really important about accessibility around sex is variety and, like, opening your mind up to stuff you might not know about or haven't thought about. Because one, even if you have a normative body, variety is always good. And if something happens, if you like, one of the things that is true in the world is that able-bodied people are all temporarily able-bodied people because they may tomorrow not be able-bodied people,
right,
or the next day. And so being aware, and this is a thing that I've seen and I've experienced myself, is this is an example around age, is that a lot of people, when they age, they're oftentimes in denial when a certain like function starts to malfunction. Like, you can't hear as well, you can't walk as well. Like a lot of people like resist getting a hearing aid or a cane or these things because they feel like it makes them less than. Well, as somebody who's 31 and uses a mobility scooter, I've had to deal with some of that loss in different ways, and like acknowledging that it's a thing that can and likely will happen in some way is the first step, and also realizing that we have both the mental power to be okay with ourselves and oftentimes the technological power to overcome.
Totally.
and not and we're not using it to our full advantage, and it's part of the reason that I do what I do around accessibility with general businesses, because like we're not implementing it as well as we should. But no matter what your physical abilities are, you're still a person. You still deserve dignity and respect and all of those things that other people deserve.
Is there, in terms of details, like, is there anything we should talk about around being fat and sex, or like fat sex, or like, is there a message that fat people need to hear and that normative people need to hear? Like, is there something around that we should go into?
I mean, one, fat people have sex. That's a thing. It's not one, I mean, fat people even have normative sex, if you will. But there's this, I think it's actually a larger issue, is that people, it's about desirability. Because if what we do in our culture is that if you are put in a situation where you have to like acknowledge that somebody that you wouldn't have sex with is a sexual being, we get grossed out by that. So if it's not somebody that you would potentially get into bed with, then somehow it's weird that they're sexual. We need to let that go. Because, I mean, like, I don't need to know the details of my parents' sex life, but I hope they're knocking boots.
Yeah.
And having great sex. And I hope I'm knocking boots when I'm their age, or when I'm 80 or whatever. Like, you as, whatever age you are, don't you want that? Why wouldn't other people? And why can't we have this respect for each other without getting all of the details, but like empowering people to be full people, versus, how oppression works and putting people into boxes, because people who live fuller lives have more to contribute more to their communities, to their own relationships, because they're fulfilled.
I like your comfort with the truth.
Oh, thank you.
I
appreciate that.
I think it takes so much strength for any of us. I think it's kind of like, I think that comfort with truth is one of the greatest lessons of adulthood. And it's this great measure of maturity.
Yeah.
And you're so rooted in it. And
thanks.
And then applying it to this other topic that everybody's scared to talk about. Well, two of them, really. Yeah. Sex and fatness. Well, I mean, and all of them, transgender and queerness.
Yeah, and also, I mean, like, accessibility. So another way to think about shifting the conversation around accessibility stuff is, like, people talk about disabilities, right? I talk about people with varying access needs. People with disabilities are seen as, they're infantilized. Mm-hmm. They have, they're seen with like no agency. And it's like, no, we are people. People in wheelchairs don't need to be patted on the head. That happens. That happens adults.
Holy cow.
I know adults that have gotten patted on the head like they're 3.
Wow.
Yeah. And like your response, like people have these reactions of like, wow, this thing's happened. And like,
I mean, I'm kind of dumbfounded.
Yeah. And I think the thing is that I wish you weren't. I wish you knew that it happened. There's the fact that people don't see these things happening, or they don't realize that they are happening.
Totally. You know, I want to say also something about the grossness concept.
Yeah.
When things are new or different, there does seem to be this visceral thing that human beings do, which is to think that it's possibly dangerous or somehow scary and therefore gross.
Yeah.
And I just want to go on record and say that gayness, transgenderness, fatness, these are not contagious things, and they're not diseases.
And even if they were, and that goes back to like, yeah, there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with any of these things. And the fact, like I get that like a lot of people have them in this other like gross box, right?
Yeah.
But they've been put there by our culture. You have the opportunity to not keep them in there. I guess is maybe the thing that I would want the message to be. I hesitate to say it quite this way, but I can't think of a different way to say it. What are you missing out on? Like, what are you missing out on? Right,
because everybody has these self-imposed boxes, and you don't know what's on the outside of them if you're not willing to go look.
Yeah. Yeah. So like, what do you regularly hang out with people that have various disabilities or that are queer or that, you know what I mean? And if you don't, like, what are some opportunities that might expand that? Not so that, you have the token gay or the token, like, black person. Like, that's like a thing.
Well, it's a fine line to walk.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, that's a tough balance. How do you walk it? Because on one hand, you want to engage with people from all walks. On the other hand, you don't want to tokenize people. What's the...
Like, it is a fine line. But, like, being open to it and consciously saying, hey... there's a big swath of people that are missing from my life, and maybe look at it that way as opposed to like I have to go find these people, but like, hey, there's some influences that are missing, and there's and not influences isn't even the right word. It's like there are awesome people of different of different experiences that aren't in my life, and I want to be open to that.
Yeah.
Versus like I'm going to go, find the person in the wheelchair and hang out with them at this party. It's two different things. And if it happens, it happens, and you have to be in. Because I think it has to be a conscious thing though, because we unconsciously cut ourselves off from it. So I think what people kind of feel weird about is the conscious, like, why should I have to think about this? It's like because you've been taught to disregard these other people.
Yeah.
So like, get over the fact that you need to think about it and then open yourself up to it.
What are you missing out on?
What are you missing out on? What are you missing out on? Yes.
There's something I've heard from fat people out there about this invisibility experience of being invisible.
Yeah.
And from what I've heard, it's this experience of going out into public, and then people will either put too much attention on you and shame you, or pretend you're not even there.
Yeah.
And then the question, I think for people who are perpetrating that behavior, I don't know what's going through their heads, but I imagine in the charitable perspective of it could be they don't want to give you undue attention. Like, they don't want to make you feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Is there a Jedi mind shift trick to occur there for humans?
We're people. And I mean, and I think, and so there's that, yes, they hold on to that. And I understand that there is a process of things that we have learned and how we interact with people, and fat people are people, disabled people are people. It doesn't treat everybody with dignity and respect. And even like Like, for example, a lot of people, they notice somebody that might not be a neurotypical person and that might have, might be doing a script of like repeating something or saying something over again. And people just don't know what to do. Treat that person like a person. Say hi. Or, if you're in line, be like, hey, it sounds like you really like burritos. Like, that's cool. And then maybe they say the same thing over again, and that's fine. The best you can do is treat somebody with dignity and respect in the moment. And the first thought you have is what you're programmed to think, and your second thought is what defines you, because it's what you do about the first thought.
Every time I listened to this interview during the editing process, I found myself so refreshed by Rachel's comfort with what simply is. And Rachel, I've got to say, thank you so much for doing the hard work for the rest of us. I'm grateful, and it was a pleasure to talk with you. If you'd like to learn more about Rachel, check out their amazing blog, thebadassfatass.com, spelled exactly as you would imagine that spelled. You can read their missives and even support their work by donating via Patreon. And you can find links to their Patreon page in our show notes this week, and you can also find links to the blog in our show notes. Now, as I said at the outset of the program, I've decided to take on a very small number of couples to help them prepare for long-term commitment. If you'd like to hear more about that program, reach out to me via email or contact me via our website, together.show. Now, this was the last episode of Season 2. We'll be back in September, which means that we've got to start gathering interviews now for that relaunch. So if you know any couples who'd be great guests on the program, couples or people in any configuration of a relationship, please let me know. I'd love to do an interview, as you can guess. And if you liked what you heard today, please subscribe to us and leave us a review on iTunes. It makes a huge difference and helps other people find our program. If you've got questions or comments, or if you just like to connect, you can reach out on social media. Our Facebook page is facebook.com/togethershow. Twitter and Instagram are both @together_show. And you can always email me at host@together.guide. The music in today's episode is by Blue Dot Sessions, and you can find them at sessions.blue. They're a fantastic group, and I'm very grateful for their excellent music. And that's all for now, folks. Have a great summer, and we'll see you in September.